Hi everyone, my name's Ryan. I'm the founder of Fomo.com. We're a conversion rate optimization tool, and I want to show how we build integrations. I've previously written about how we prioritize integrations. We take a mixture of customer requests with feedback and our gut and data from the market, but now it's time to show how we literally do it. What Fomo does, I'm not going to give you a pitch, this isn't about that, but what we do is we show off customer behaviors, recent purchases, live visitors, really anything you want on your website. And by doing this, we contend that it increases trust and therefore increases conversion rates. Fomo builds a lot of integrations. We have around 80 as of today, which is May 2019. We'll soon have closer to 100 or more. And when I recently tweeted to ask if people want to know how we build integrations, several of you said yes. I only got a few yeses, actually, maybe 5, but that is enough for me. It doesn't take a lot of motivation to get started. So the good timing is good. We recently got a customer request to build an integration with a tool called reviews.io. It's also reviews.co.uk. This is a product and merchant review app. I've not heard of it before. I haven't gotten in touch with them. I've spent no more than 5 to 10 minutes clicking around their website. So they don't know we're doing this, but all I know is they have an API, and I know that we integrate with a lot of reviews apps. So we're going to get that done. Before I get started, though, it's worth mentioning I'm not really a developer. I learned to code after being a non-technical marketer for a few years and just getting really frustrated when I thought I had decent ideas that my developer peers were unwilling or unable or disinterested in building for me or in prioritizing for me ahead of their other tasks. But nowadays, fast forward a couple years, I build most of the integrations at Fomo. I've built about 50 of our 80. And what we want to do today is just see kind of how Fomo builds integration so quickly. We have a generator, we have a process, we have systems in place, and we have, I think, really great architecture that allows us to scale our integrations library to meet customer needs as quickly as possible. So let's dive in. Let's check out what we're working with. Here's my tweet, in case you think I'm full of it. We got a customer request to build reviews.io. Here's our integration tracker, which I also have a screenshot of elsewhere in our blog about building integrations. And it's really our brain for our product roadmap in terms of connecting with other sites. We have probably 10 Trello boards to handle bugs, front end, back end, major releases, things like that. But our integration tracker is what we use to know what integration to build next. So that's here, and you can see that I've moved over into my current sprint to build reviews.io. If I go to reviews.io, you can see that it's kind of a network or a marketplace. Maybe I can search for a brand, and they'll show me reviews. So that's kind of neat. And of course, we can see in the top corner, it says, "Are you a business? Click here." So what we're going to do is we're going to just create a new account, and we're going to get our own API keys, or at least attempt to. And we're going to create some sample reviews and then build the integration from scratch. I actually do have credentials for a live customer, but I think doing that would maybe be a little bit cheating. So let's just go through the process from 0 to 1. So I see this tool, looks like they've got reviews, start a trial. I'm not sure if I have to type in a credit card or if they have a developer portal. So a lot of times I'll Command F the page for developer or API. I don't see that. Maybe I'll look for business solutions, or I'll search reviews.io, API, developer. And I'll try to find maybe a subdomain like developers.reviews.io that will let me maybe make a free account without a credit card and create a sandbox library. But it doesn't always work. And even when it does, sometimes it's like this, where you have to kind of apply and wait around. But we don't like waiting around. We don't like getting people's permission. So we're just going to sign up as a regular user. And then another thing I might do is try to go to like a pricing page and see if I can join a free plan versus a paid plan. You can see here, it's kind of clever maybe. I went to /pricing. It says it's a 404 page, but the page title says price plans. So obviously this is actually a real page. They've just put 404 in the middle. If I go down here, now I can see this other price plans link. And here we go. So they've got company reviews, product reviews, local reviews. We're going to see if we can show off all of this information on a Fomo website, Fomo customer's website. So let's just hit free trial. Okay, I'll add company reviews, keep it at this lowest plan possible in case it asks for my credit card. And it says no credit card needed. So let's just get going. This is my Google Voice. You're welcome to spam me. I will not answer it. We already have an account. I don't even know. Oh, maybe the people who owned Fomo before us. Interesting. Try use Fomo. Book your activation. Oh no. Book your activation call. Maybe if I book the call, my account will work. If not, I'm going to use our customer's credentials because I'm not going to wait around for this. So book my call. Tomorrow, I'm not going to show up, but I will cancel ahead of time. Maybe now it will let me go into my dashboard. Let's see. Demo booked. Oh my. Can I log in? Let's try this now. Email's registered. Incredible. Forgot my password. Now it says I don't have an email. Okay. Well, I'm going to use our customer's API credentials then. I'm not going to deal with this anymore. I could check my email, but I don't think they're going to let me in. So I'm going to use our customer's credentials, and I will just blur those out. So I'm going to click this open and blur these in my video edit. Okay, so we got the credentials. Now let's get into what we need to do. So I'm going to find the Reviews.io API documentation. And the way I like to think about this is something that Chris Lee, Kevin Wang talk about. So they run launchschool.com. That's how I learned to code. And they say when you're sort of preparing to do something, you want to write pseudocode, right? So I could say, fetch a product review, grab first name and maybe product thumbnail from the review, right? And I want to turn that into a notification. So that's our pseudocode. That's obviously really simple, but that gets us started. And when we think about that now looking at the documentation, I can see nouns and verbs. So a noun would be a product review. A noun would be a merchant review. Let's fetch those. And then if I look into these sample responses, these payloads, I can kind of see those things I want. So I want to fetch a review. That's this whole block. And then I also want to grab the first name from the review. So that's right here, first name Angela. And I also want to get the product thumbnail. I don't see an image here, but it looks like an image would be there. I can search the page for image. Here we go. So this would be a product.image URL. So that would be the thumbnail. I could also sometimes search for thumbnail or photos. And now we can see we've got some parameters and filters. So we'll get to that later. But that's what we want to do here. And in case, again, you're completely new to Fomo and want a little more context, if I go to, let's say, our integration with Yotpo, we integrate with another review tool called Yotpo, and we create these Fomo notifications. Let's see if I can find an example that might say, you know, someone just gave us 5 stars on this product. So something like this. Peter gave our blue shirt 5-star review and said, I'm loving it. Okay, great. Well, now we already can kind of figure that any app out there that does product reviews or merchant reviews or Yelp reviews, Google reviews, whatever, they're all going to have these similar variables. They're going to have people's names, whatever it is they're reviewing, when they reviewed it, what they reviewed, what they said about it, if they gave it stars or rating or good, thumbs up, thumbs down. So that's kind of our paradigm here. And of course, Fomo has built a lot of integrations with review products. So we've got Judge Me, we've got Stamped, We've got Trustpilot. We've got Google reviews. So we're no stranger to building integrations for reviews. So now we can kind of get going. I kind of want to mention my tools for today. So first I have what I call a prison latte. Quite good. It's cold brew with ice, with a little bit of low-fat milk, with stevia or artificial sweetener, and vanilla extract. It's quite good. And I also have a water because I'm in northern Thailand. It's 101 degrees Fahrenheit right now. I have a remote control for the air conditioning because I'm going to treat myself today. Let's turn this down a bit. And then I have my bare hands. So that's how we're going to build this Fomo integration. I try to build them really as quickly as possible. We're going to go a little slower today because I'm going to be thinking out loud throughout, but I'm still going to try to move pretty quickly so that whether you're a developer watching or a marketer, there'll be something interesting to see. For developers watching, I think you might be interested by our architecture and our approach. And for marketers watching, I hope you acknowledge that this stuff is really not very hard. And if you are looking for an excuse or a reason to get into programming so that you can be like me and kind of not wait on developers to build your dreams, then hopefully this will be a little bit encouraging. So first things first, let's go to Fomo's code base. I store it in my Dropbox. A lot of people are anti that, but I like doing that because it means I can switch machines and all of my stuff is up to date. Git pull origin master from the Fomo code base, get the latest. Now I'm going to make a branch. I'll zoom in on this guy. I'm going to branch because a few developers are hacking on Fomo right now, a few of my colleagues, and I don't want to conflict with what they're doing. So I'm going to make a branch called feature reviews IO integration. So now we've got a branch, we've got kind of our own parallel universe that we can write code and it won't bother anybody and it won't break our production app. And the first thing I'm actually going to do is generate an integration kind of skeleton. So what I mean by that, this is not really an app thing, a coding thing. This is something specifically we built at Fomo. We have how to create a native integration. We built our own generator. And what this does, it's really a glorified copy paste, command F, whatever kind of tool, utility that just sets up our code base to handle a new incoming integration. We don't have to create new database tables or attributes or anything like that, and I'll describe how we pull that off in a bit. But we do need a couple files, right? So we need a file to hold our tests. We need a file to have the avatar image of whatever tool we're integrating with. We obviously need a file to hold the logic that's going to map over these variables, so a person's first name or a photo or whatever. And then we need a file that kind of has metadata about the integration. So what's the reviews.io website? Where's our support documentation going to live? And this Rails generate integrate integration command is going to set us up for that. So this is something we built internally, and it saves us a lot of time when we build new integrations. Looks like someone's updated some dependencies, so I'm going to bump those. And by the way, Fomo is built in Rails. We're currently running the latest, I think Rails 5.2.2. Rails generate integration, running this command, and I'm just going to do what it tells me to do. Booting up our app. What's the integration name? So I think maybe we should call it reviews.io. So if I go back to reviews.io, one way I like to determine the exact name of an app is by Googling it and then looking at the metadata. So you can see here the page title is reviews.io, and that's sort of baked into their name, right? It's not just a URL, it's kind of part of their logo. Here though, it's all caps reviews.io. So I'm just gonna search reviews.io to see how they describe themselves on Google. And here it looks like they describe themselves as reviews.co.uk. If I go to their Twitter, I see reviews.io. So let's go with reviews.io. Now when we built Judge Me, their website is actually, I think, judge.me, but we built it as Judge Me without the dot. I think reviews.io wouldn't work well with it saying Reviews.io. So let's just call it maybe Reviews UK. We can change that later, but Reviews Co, Reviews.io seems weird. I don't want to put a dot in the name, to be honest, but we could. So let's try Reviews. Let's stick with it. Reviews.io. Email avatar. What does this mean? Well, when someone creates a Fomo integration or connects something, if that integration includes a person's email, we can turn that into an avatar. To know whether or not this integration will support avatars, I need to quickly look again at the API documentation. And I'm just going to search the word email. Customer email. Okay, this is not for reviews though. Let's go to merchant reviews. Service feedback email. Do I see any example emails in here? I see the reviewer's name. I do not see their email. So I'm going to assume we can't get that. If I look at product reviews, do I get an email in here? It doesn't look like it. Reviewer's email address, optional. Okay, so we might be able to get it. So let's just say yes, and we can turn it off later. So yes, IP mapping. Do we get an IP address that allows me to then extract locations? And see if I type in IP, it's kind of a lot of false positives. I'm going to do IP underscore in my Command F. No, use location. Okay, so there's an address, but it's optional. We won't always get it. So we don't get IP, so no, in for no. Map image, because we don't get a location, can't for sure say we can support maps. So no. Category, well, it's reviews category. Integration type. Okay, this is pretty neat. Really quickly, we've identified at Fomo, and you can adapt this at really any application that wants to have integrations. We've identified that really every app out there in the world, every web app anyway, that uses modern HTTP protocols and technologies can be authenticated against with one of these three strategies. So OAuth we're really familiar with. When you're browsing around and you sign into something with Facebook as a way to sign up, or you sign into something with Gmail, that's an authentication strategy called OAuth. And OAuth has OAuth 1 and OAuth 2. We support both. The next is simple webhook. We call it simple webhook. And webhooks are just a server sending you a payload of data that you can do whatever you want with. Some of the apps we integrate with, like Teachable, which is an online course platform, and others, they support webhooks. If you've ever connected a Zapier integration and said, when this happens, ping the data to over and hit this app, that's also an example of a webhook. And some apps just support webhooks. So you don't need a password. You can just feed the admin panel a destination for your information. And then finally, there's Connect Form. Connect Form is, again, an internal tool or term for us at Fomo. What this means is that connecting with some app requires a person to copy paste in some keys. So if you sign in with Twitter, that's OAuth. But if you, for example, go to a website and it says, connect your Intercom account, just paste in the API key from this page, that would be in our case called Connect Form. So looking again at the API docs, a lot of times I like to go directly to their authentication strategy. So if I go here, a lot of times at the very top, they'll say something like authenticate or getting started. So I'll search get, start, auth, nothing. Honestly, these docs are not that amazing, so we're going to kind of have to figure it out. But when I look here, grabbing merchant reviews, I see these parameters. I don't know what these mean, but I do have these or something like this from our sample customer. So secret API key, that's always a good one. Store ID. Okay, so I'm going to say that this is a Connect Form integration. Our customers who use reviews.co.uk to collect product and merchant reviews, they will punch in these two values from somewhere inside their reviews account, and they'll punch those values into Fomo. So I'm going to call this Connect Form. Connect Form, enter. External URL, what's the URL of this website? Well, reviews.io is sort of the URL, but reviews.co.uk is the URL where people seem to log into their account. So I'm going to plug that in. Subtitle, shopping cart software. Here's another example where I like to say, how do they describe themselves, right? How does reviews.io kind of give themselves what's their elevator pitch? So reviews.io, maybe their Twitter, making the world a better place, one review at a time. I might just say something simple. Collect reviews, collect company reviews. Well, let's start there. Collect company reviews. And description, show off recent, so here we go, show off recent reviews from reviews.io. Something simple. Notes. Notes is our way of kind of letting that integration describe itself. So I'm just going to take their meta description. Sometimes we take their Twitter bio, whatever. And you can see now what this did. So by running this generator, I answered around 7 questions. And a lot of times if I'm integrating with a tool I'm more familiar with, that maybe I've even used in the past, I will kind of fly through these questions. I wouldn't spend 5 minutes on it, I'd spend 30 seconds. But what it does is it creates these files, and we can check them out, but it created a couple SVGs that I can plug the reviews logo into. It created some test files, those are in our spec directory. It created a single file to handle our integration logic itself, and it created, or it inserted, a change to a single master file that holds all of our integrations. So let's actually check that out. So now we're looking at Fomo's code base. This is the first time this has been ever on any kind of footage or public. Integration YAML. So there's a lot of ways to do this. We've iterated this a lot of ways, but you can see that each integration has a pair of key values. So one integration that we have is MailChimp. We connect to MailChimp. It is an OAuth pop-up type of connection. It's a newsletter sign-up tool. Here's the descriptions. Here's the features it has available. So if you remember those yes, no things I plugged in, here's the categories, the MailChimp URL, description of MailChimp. We can hide it or show it. Sometimes we hide integrations while they're in beta, and this hides it in the interface, but it's still available. And then whether or not we want to let people connect multiple instances of MailChimp, which I can get into later. And we just repeat those same key values for all of our integrations. So this is not a database, this is sort of a pseudo database table. It's just a read-only file that our app, when you're looking at, for example, fomo.com/integrations, all that's doing, this entire page on demand, is it loads all of these integrations, it loops through them, says integration.name, it sticks that here. And then it concatenates some magic in the background to figure out the avatar and the subtitle right there. So that's all we're doing. We didn't copy paste this, these divs, right? We just add an integration to this file and it shows up here. So now we've got that going and we can kind of understand the anatomy. And then here, this file is where we're going to put all of our integration logic. Right now, let me zoom out again. It's about 40 lines of code, and these are just stubs, right? So this doesn't really do anything now. This doesn't know what reviews.io is, but this is sort of our paradigm. This is sort of our strategy. When someone connects an integration, we can set up their notifications and we can import stuff, and then we parse the data. So that's kind of our strategy. This is very flexible. So each of these is kind of, if you're a developer, you'll be familiar with this, callbacks. So we have after connect, before connect, after disconnect, before disconnect. We have some auth strategies based on whatever the integration does or how it works. And then we have some helpers that let us set up those notification messages. And again, what this is doing here is the equivalent of what we looked at in our help articles. So when we looked at, let's look at another one, say Trustpilot. Trustpilot's a product review or merchant review company. And here's a sample notification, a bit blurry. We've got an image URL, we've got a customer's first name, and that they just rated us 5 stars. So that is all handled here. So I can say first name just gave us stars rating, something like that. And so we'll do all of that in just a minute. So this is kind of our basic setup. I'm going to change this to say reviews.io review. That's the name of this type of connection. And then these variables we're going to work on together. So that's our basic setup. First name just gave us a, let's say, stars 5-star rating time ago. All right. So we've got the basics in place. I'm going to kill some of these extra line breaks, zoom out a little bit. So again, this is a little more clear. And now let's do our first commit. So git status, of course, we changed that file. We can again go look at our changes. It's probably at the very bottom. Here we go, reviews.io. So you can see I plugged in .io, but it created an _io, so it parameterized that value. The friendly name is reviews.io, and just in our backend, we'll call it reviews_io. And we can see that we also even generated a help article link. So now when I go into our knowledge base tool, we're currently using Intercom, I will create a link that perfectly matches this URL. So we're just trying to remove as many steps as possible. Remove needing to think or be creative, because our creativity was in building out this system. Our creativity is not on a per integration build basis. That would be not streamlined at all, and it would make it really difficult for multiple engineers to build Fomo integrations and achieve the same results. So that's our basic setup. I'm just going to commit this and say generate reviews.io integration. Now I'm going to push this up, and the moment I do this, any other developers who are currently working right now on Fomo will see, oh, okay, Ryan's building an integration. Classic Ryan. So now that that's out of the way, let's start looking at fetching data. So before we write more code, I kind of want to just toy around with fetching data using our customers' API keys. Again, I'm going to expose those now, and that's why I'm recording this video instead of live streaming. I will blur them out in the final copy. So I've got a store ID here and an API key. I'm going to throw these both into a URL that we form by looking at the API docs. So the first thing we want to do, let's get merchant reviews. Okay, merchant reviews would be someone who says, you know, this company is awesome, right? Whereas a product review is someone saying, I bought this baseball cap and it was awesome, but you're not necessarily commenting on the company. So here's what's called the base URL. This is the construction point of our API request. And then this is the HTTP verb, means get. A GET request is what you're used to doing when you click around the web. You're just fetching data from a server. So you're making a GET request. Now I'm going to copy and paste this and try to go to it. Nothing happens. It says auth failed, required store. Okay, now let's go back here and I can see these parameters. These are query parameters. They just, when a GET request, it's a query parameter. It's a post request. It might be a body key value pair. Different developers use different phrasing. I don't really care about any of that because I'm not a real developer. So let's just kind of play dumb. Let's add a query parameter and say store equals ASDF. Now it's giving me more information, but it says, you know, I don't know what store basically you're talking about. Store ASDF, I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm going to grab our customers' API keys and use those. All right, so now I've got a ton of data. So now I've made a successful API request, but I can't really do much with it by just visiting this URL. I kind of need to get this into my code somehow, right? So what I want to now do is boot up my server. So I'm going to just kind of out of paranoia, run any recent database migrations, potentially my colleagues have implemented. I'm going to also make sure our front end is up to date with Yarn. And now I'm going to run Yarn. So this is going to set up my front end, our JavaScript build, built-in Vue.js. This takes about 30 seconds. And on this side, I'm going to run Rails server. I'm going to put it at a different port, say 3090. Been having trouble with the usual 3000. And then I'm going to also run Redis, which we use, long story. Okay, so I've got my server running. My front end is still building. What this means is that I can go to localhost 3090 and I can see my marketing site, so my home page, our integrations page, our about page, but I won't be able to see the logged in interface yet. The CSS, the styles, the button clicks, they won't work yet because that's technically a separate server. That's the front end server. So let's wait for that to build. Meanwhile, we can try to go to my home page. A little bit slow today. I've been working on a lot of apps and I think I've been locking up my local ports. So anyway, cool. Now I'm running Fomo locally. I can sign up for the $1,000 plan and not pay with real money. It's pretty cool. I'm going to log in. this is assuming I want 30,000. Let's go to 3090. I'm going to log into Fomo, and before I actually do that, let's go to that logged out integrations page so you can see this happening. If I search for reviews, we can already see reviews.io is now dynamically appearing on our logged out integrations page, which is pretty cool, right? Because all we did was add a couple values to our integration YAML file. I didn't touch HTML or CSS or whatever, but it all kind of just works. And for the SVG, for that icon, we just default to the Fomo F icon until I replace it with something from reviews.io's website. Hopefully, we'll be able to find that later. So I'm going to go back to lvh.me3090/app. Let's try to log in. Our front end is now built, so compiled successfully. Now I'm logged in to my local version of Fomo. And I can already actually even try to connect to the integration. I can click it here. But this isn't going to do anything yet because it doesn't know anything about reviews.io. But this just goes to show you that by building that generator and architecting our setup in a way, I didn't have to write a single line of HTML or CSS to build what I think is a really pretty page, right? So we have the category tags showing the features that are available. I can click here and it will go to Fomo documentation once that exists. I can click here and go directly to the Co.uk website. I can click to connect. But again, there's no logic yet, but now we see that really all of the simple stuff is done for us. So we can focus on just building the interior of this integration. So to do that, I'm actually going to shut this stuff down because what we've now noticed is we need to pass in a store ID. And we might even need to pass in an API key. And I'm kind of curious because I passed in a store ID, which does not seem particularly special. This looks like anyone could find this. It's public information. But it already gave me data. So I don't really know why I need an API key, but let's just append that API key by doing and API key equals, and then let's grab our customer's API key. And see, maybe we get more information, and I do. So you can kind of see when I didn't have the API key to move it, the information stopped around here. And when I add the API key, it keeps going. So either we got more data because of the API keys present, or maybe we got more enriched data. So maybe we got customer values or something like that. And now I kind of want to start playing around. So maybe let's try a limit parameter. No, let's look at these other things. Per page, page. All of these are just parameters that I can append. So let's actually say and per page equals 1. See what happens. And boom, now we only see one review. I can say branch minimum rating. So this review has a rating of 4.89, or this review has a rating of 5. So I can now try to test if these API docs are accurate. I can say minimum rating. So let's say ampersand min rating equals 5 and see if this still appears, and it does. If I said min rating equals 6, it does appear. That's a little weird because the top rating is a 5. Maybe I can try max rating. Let's try max rating equals 4, and that review should not appear, and it doesn't. We now see a different review versus that one. So pretty neat, pretty straightforward. And this is what I was hoping for. Sometimes API docs aren't pretty, but they do get the job done. And so again, what we know so far is it's easy to grab merchant reviews. We did that here in this URL. Now we could try again to get product reviews. The product reviews has a different base URL. I'm actually going to keep all of this stuff in play. And let's simply swap out this base URL. And now I'm getting product reviews. So kind of cool. Per page 2 and min rating, let's say equals 3, and boom. So API is working great. We're easily able to make requests. We don't really care about headers or anything like that. Everything can be passed in as query parameters. These are the really easy ones to build. So now let's go ahead and get these inputs to our app so that our users can paste in their store ID and they can paste in their API key. So these two guys. So the way that I'm going to do that, I'm actually going to shut down our server. because we're going to make changes to that integration file, and that is only recognized when the server is restarted. So I go to reviews.io, go down here, and somewhere in here, doesn't matter where, I just need to paste in my form fields. Might seem a little bit weird, but it's as easy as that. So I'm going to go to another review app because I know I want to have, for example, a minimum stars. I want people to be able to say, hey, ignore reviews unless they're at least 4 stars, right? Something like that. So I'm taking this from Trustpilot. Now let's go back to reviews.io, and let's go, really, again, it doesn't matter where I put this, but let's put it right here. So I've got a form. The form has fields. Each one of these tick marks represents a full field, and I can add unlimited fields, and I can add field types. So these are pretty intuitive, text and a number. Now I want to change these values to match the paradigm or the terminology of customers of reviews.io. Now this is where if I had a reviews.io login, it would be really fantastic, but I don't. And so I'm going to have to kind of guess with the API docs. So when I see this, I see stores, unique store ID. So let's call this one store ID, and then the label, what the customer actually sees is store ID. The placeholder looks like it's myawesomestore-com. Looks like that's about close to what our actual customer's value is that we've been given to test this with. Minimum stars, I like keeping the same attribute names in our data as often as possible for developer friendliness. But instead of minimum star count, do they call them stars? No, they call them maybe score or rating. Okay, so minimum star count, maybe I'll say minimum rating, and then put in parentheses 1 to 5, placeholder 3. And then we also know we need an API key. So I'm going to add another field, and this is going to just be, we actually like to, for other reasons, call this access token. You'll see why in a little bit. So API key would be the label, and this can just be something, gibberish words and letters. Again, sometimes if an API key is always 4 characters and then a dash and then 3 characters and a dash, I will make our placeholder match the realistic look of an API key for just nice customer experience. But in this case, from the API key we've been given, it's just random numbers and letters, maybe make a couple of them capital. And again, I could go a little deeper on this, make the character length the same, but I'm kind of shooting in the dark because I do not have a reviews.io account. I'm using their API docs, and I'm using the sample keys that a customer was kind enough to let us borrow. So that's my form. I'm now going to boot up the server again, back on port 3090, and boot up the front-end server again. And now I want to kind of study really briefly the Trustpilot integration, because again, this is going to be a similar setup as Trustpilot. We're fetching product reviews and we're fetching merchant reviews. And so if I look at a couple things going on here, I can see, for example, there's this validate connect settings. This is really powerful for us. In fact, this is how we prevent a lot of user error. So for example, if we have a form that says, what's your API key, and some other questions, and the user ignores those inputs and just hits connect, well, we might have a problem. If we don't have a way to connect to their store, they're just going to be creating errors. They're not going to see Fomo on their website. Everybody's going to be upset. And so this validate connect settings is one of our several hooks that kind of runs a few checks to make sure that everything is as it should be. So if we say, what's the minimum rating you want, and they plug in 27, or they plug in ASDF, well, that's not going to work when the rating needs to be between 1 to 5. So I'm going to use this strategy. We have a few ways to handle validations. We've been building new ones that are a little more streamlined. This is actually a bit verbose. It's not super sexy. We have some other ways to do it, but I'm going to maybe avoid those for now and just go with this strategy. So I'm going to copy paste this from Trustpilot for now, and then we'll tweak it to fit our use case. So you can see, again, we've stubbed it out already. And if I want to validate, let's keep that spacing, business domain. So these are all those attribute values we gave here. So store ID needs to be in there. Let's actually just replace all these business domains with store ID. Okay. And then we've got another one, access token. We've got another one, minimum stars. Okay, so access token. We need one for that. Access token cannot be blank if access token's blank. And you'll see how this works. But this is going to add errors on the user end that basically give them instructions to fix their issues before we let them continue. 0 to 5, that's kind of neat, works the same way as Trustpilot. If there's a store ID, we're going to add an error. If it has an HTTP in it, it looks like that's a no bueno. We just want the URL, so mystore-com. That seems to be the way it works. And then we're going to do this auth validated thing, which is also pretty neat. So auth validated, we're simply going to do a connection. We're going to actually fetch data from their store, from their website. And so we did that here in the URL. We fetched reviews, right, for a different store. And what we're going to do is we're going to just do a fetch and look for this status to kind of say one way or the other whether it worked. And that's how we're able to catch early on if the API keys they gave us were maybe incorrect. Maybe there was a typo or something like that. Let's fix all this. Ooh, it's no fun when this happens. It's the interior. There we go. So now we've got a validator, and let's kind of give it a shot. And let's just ignore this for now. Pass this in. We'll build out, again, the logic later. We're just going one step at a time. So we've got our server up and running again. I'm going to refresh my tab. Nice. Good. Let's get back in. Okay. Might have a syntax error. Size concept. Just going to go into the server console. Okay. Make sure I'm able to grab reviews.io. 87. Huh. Sometimes you just got to restart the server. Okay. So everything looks good to me. Let's try to reboot. Let's reboot Redis as well. Why not? Running Rails, front end. Try to boot that one more time. Give this 60 seconds. So in the meantime, we're going to go back to this integration file. So what is our flow here? What actually happens when someone hits connect to a Fomo integration? Well, first we validate what they gave us. So that's going to run those form field values through this method, which is, again, very verbose, pretty simplistic, and we're working on making this more streamlined. But that's the first thing it's going to do. And if anything's wrong, maybe a value is blank that's not allowed to be blank, or a value is malformed, we're going to tell the user. So they're not going to be able to move forward. So this is the form fields on the user-facing integration page. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to run our hooks. Run hooks. So this is going to be our callbacks, like after connect, before connect, etc. Our after connect, what it typically does is it sets up the template. The template is going to have that messaging, right? So this is that messaging. First name just did this. It's going to set that up, stub it out for the user, and then it's going to import. Import usually looks something like this. Get all objects iterate each object and save it as a Fomo event. What do I mean by objects? Well, in this case, an object is going to be a review, and that could be a product review or a merchant review, right? So we're going to grab all of the product reviews, maybe that say at least 4 stars rating or whatever the user decides. We're going to grab all the merchant reviews, and then for each of those merchant reviews, we're going to save it. And the way that's going to look in more real code, we're going to say reviews equals something like get reviews, reviews.each, and then this is just shorthand Ruby. We're going to say webhook review. And this webhook is now being invoked, and we're going to kill that, and we're going to start parsing the reviews. So here we're going to map values from the payload to a Fomo event, or you could call it a notification. And what do those payload values look like? Well, let's go back to the API docs, right? If I go to getting a merchant review, this is all of the reviews. This is a collection of reviews. So that means one review is going to look basically like this. So we're going to be mapping values from something like this. So this is going to be those params, and we're going to say params.rating. We're going to get the how many stars. Params.comments, and we're going to learn what the person said. Params.reviewer.firstname, and we're going to know that it was Angela who left that review. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing. And when API docs are well done, you're almost able to build entire integrations without having a login, without even having a customer. You can sort of just eyeball it from the API. Now, I don't recommend this, and we try hard to never have to do this, but sometimes that's a way to get to sort of a closed beta. You can look at API docs, kind of guess your way around using the sample payloads, and with that information, you can get something that looks nice, and then that will be enough to attract sample beta customers, that kind of thing. So we're going to get all of our reviews. We're going to loop through. This means I need a method called getReviews. Again, we'll rewrite this. Let's just have this return an empty array, or let's have it return stuff. So sample review. So now we're going to loop through this. Let's put a binding pry here, and that will let us basically pause in time if you're not familiar with Ruby or debugging tools. And let's go back to trying out connecting our app with just dummy values. Because again, it doesn't know anything about reviews.io right now. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to change the port again. Just double checking this guy. It's definitely looking good to me. Prison latte, coffee break time. And now we're logged in. So it just really didn't like me using a different port. Sorry for wasting everyone's time. Reviews.io. Here we go. Now we can see our sample notification is there. Obviously I need to fix this. It needs a double curly. John just gave us 5-star review. If I click connect, this is pretty neat. So this yellow bar is only there because I'm in local development. This is not in our website, fomo.com. But you can now see what's going on here. So these form fields are actually being read from this integration YAML file. So I'll go back to reviews.io. Remember, this is sort of our control room for the entire integration. It's just 12 lines or so of code. Most of it is just descriptions. This form right here, lines 1902 to 1915, this dictates, this governs this. And if I go further, I can see that here, the minimum rating, I can enter a number, but I cannot enter a string. I can't enter ASDF, for example. I can inspect that and see that this input type is actually type number. So that corresponds to what I plugged in here, type number. The name of the field is turned into the ID, which is often used in the name, often used for form submissions and handling HTTP requests. So you'd use a snake case version, something like that. The label is, of course, what the user sees right here. And then, of course, we have placeholders as well. So this becomes the UX. So someone's going, well, I'm not necessarily very technical, or I've never had to figure out my API key for my reviews.io account. What the heck does it look like? Well, when they start navigating to their settings, and we help them do that here, because when they click this link, we go to this assumed URL, right, which was also automatically generated. When they go to that link, it will explain, log into reviews.io, go to this tab, and then when they're staring at a bunch of random values, they'll kind of understand which one's which, because we will have, with our placeholder text, made it sort of intuitive. Oh, this probably goes here. This probably goes here. I think whether you're technical or not, it can be very confusing to look at a field or form of fields with a lot of random strings you need to insert to know which ones go where. I've had this problem even recently connecting a new Twitter account, and I was building the app, and I still wasn't sure. Client secret, client ID, consumer secret, consumer ID, OAuth token secret. It can get pretty confusing pretty quickly. So that's what that does. Let's now just type in dummy values. myawesomestore-com, API key, ASDF, minimum rating 4. And when I hit connect, that's going to immediately invoke this method. So I can even put a pry here, and we can see what is going down. So connect, this is loading. Now look at this. I'm now frozen in time, and I can look at those settings, and you can see these are all those values we plugged in on the form. Now, these aren't being checked for accuracy. All that's happening is that we are checking that the star count, for example, is turned into a value, and we're checking that that value is between 1 to 5. That's all we're doing. Next, you can see this cool gibberish here. We inserted a connection to the integration in our database. We inserted a template on our backend. We call those event types. And now we're down here. We're at line 66, def webhook, and now we're frozen in time again, and I can inspect, and that is going to be this guy, sample review. So let's verify, and here we go, sample review. So let's suppose this was a real payload. Let's go back to that sample payload from the API docs. If I plug this in, I can even plug it in directly here. If I said actually params is going to be this guy, say Jason. Right? I could, well, I need to do a little work on it, but I could plug that in, and let's swap these nulls, nils, and now I can actually mock out building the integration even though I am not connected to anybody's account. So these are my params. If I want to get the first name, I can say params reviewer first name, boom, Angela. And this is really how we build integrations. This is the crux of it. So we ran the generator, right? We checked out the API docs to make sure we had the nouns and the verbs, you know, what variables are available to us. And then we literally write, I mean, again, the meat of a Fomo integration, the custom in air quotes, or the proprietary part in air quotes of our integrations is 10 to 20 lines of code, and it goes right here. The rest of it is our system. And so really the proprietary part of our integrations is that process. It's not the actual execution of mapping variables. Now, that's one way to grab first name. I go into params, right? And then I dig into reviewer, dig into first name. But for that, we actually use another tool called dig. Params.dig reviewer does the same thing, comma, separated first name. What's really nice about this strategy instead of this bracket notation is that if for whatever reason this reviewer section or the first name is blank or whatever, it won't error on us. So if I went back to this old strategy with these brackets and I said reviewers, well, that's breaking. Long story short, it's breaking because I'm trying to invoke methods on stuff that doesn't exist. But if I use the dig method, reviewers, it doesn't care. I can pass in fake stuff, and it's just going to sort of fail silently. Now you have to be careful. It's an art and a science knowing when to use methods like dig that fail silently versus when you want the errors to scream at you. But that's sort of just another another technique we use. Comments, so I like that. We always want to know what the person said. We actually internally call it caption. Again, just part of our workflow. I'm not saying there's a better or wrong way to do it. Caption, ratings, of course. Looks like name, rating of the name. Maybe that's like the review title, you know, so they wrote a title and a body. So they wrote great service, really, really like the service, something like that. So we don't know though, right? We really don't know because we don't have a reviews.io account. So for now, we're just gonna YOLO, params, ratings, params.dig, ratings, and then I'm gonna do what? Add name. Of course, this is now a collection of stuff. So it appears that the person could potentially say, sort of like on Airbnb, they could say, I'm leaving a review for this company. I give their customer service a 5 out of 5. I give the pricing a 2 out of 5 and location a 4 out of 5. And so this bracket means it's a collection. So I'm actually going to say, grab the ratings, grab the first rating. Oh. Let's see, try first. It's really not my day. There we go. Try first, .dig, name. Okay, so again, we're just trying to make it fail as silently as possible. That's my title of the review, customer service. And if I want more information like the score, which I do, let's call that, for now, let's just call that stars. We'll see how I do it in some of the other integrations. Let's actually just do that now. Let's look at Trustpilot. We call it review stars. I'm actually going to grab all of this because I like that. Throw this down here. Review stars, caption short, caption. So now I have a caption short, caption long. We'll look at what that does. Let's call this review stars. So now I've mapped 4 variables from reviews.io, merchant reviews, and I'm kind of ready to go. Now I need to do a couple more things. For example, I need to make sure I never save the same review twice. So we always grab the external primary key ID of the review. A lot of times it's just params ID. In this example, we don't have one. So either this is because it's a sample from the documentation, which is kind of crummy, but let's look at the actual data when we were using our customers' keys. Product review ID, product reviews. Of course, what are we looking at? We've been looking at product reviews. Order ID, product review ID. We're going to grab that. Params.dig, product review ID. And that's going to be some value like ASDF. What we're then going to do is just return if we've already saved that. Again, I think some of this stuff might be kind of head scratching. That's okay. It's not you, it's me. We just make sure that we don't save the same notification twice. We also have database constraints that avoid it, but why even handle the processing power on our server side of parsing reviews if we know we already have it saved? So we have a mixture of database constraints that prevent us saving the same thing twice, as well as these sort of in-code inline checks. So we're going to return if we already have that. And of course, this method is not a magic method. It's defined in another file. It's defined in our base file. So that's sort of a shared library we use for all these integrations. And that's what allows an integration to be 100 lines of code and to do a ton of cool stuff. It's because we're sharing a lot of code in other files of our app that don't have to be touched just to build a new connection. So return if it already exists. We're going to grab the template. We like to just say this, grab the default one. And then again, we're going to return unless the template is active. So if the customer were to go into Fomo and toggle off a template, we don't want to save any more information. So this is kind of obeying that business logic. Now we're mapping our variables. Now we're going to stub out a new event. The reason we do this instead of just saying event.new is because it prevents some server-side caching that we witnessed. And then we're going to do this event.assign attributes, map over the variables we created, external ID, template, first name. Oop, we need an image URL. We have our title. We don't have our created at yet either. So let's stub those out. We need to get our image URL, and we need to get our created at. Okay. And let's see where those are. So if we look at this sample, we can see the image was in branch. But that's a little weird, and I might be looking at the wrong thing here, right? Because this is What a Great Company. This sample payload is for a merchant review, but we're looking at product reviews. So really we need to kind of understand if it's a merchant review or not. So let's first, and this is going to be really simplified for now, if merchant review, passing the params to figure it out. We don't know if it is yet. We haven't built that logic yet. If it's a merchant review, we're going to get variables in one way. Let's just assume it is now. Otherwise, we're going to get variables in another way, right? Else if product review, again, we'll clean this up. And let's assume we can get all these same things, but that the values are going to be somewhere different. Okay, so this is sort of like a to-do, right? And then once we have all those values, we can save them down. And at the bottom, we're going to save the event. So we'll see how this works. So right now we're in the middle of parsing our merchant reviews. We use the sample payload, and now looking at actual data, we're looking at product reviews. So let's fetch some product reviews. Let's throw these in our, let's actually limit it per page, 1. Let's get this in our, sort of in our machine, right? Put in here, replace nulls with nils. Okay, data equals that stuff, data reviews, cool. Now I want to just switch from copying and pasting from docs and from our browser. Excuse me, I just want to copy, I want to switch strategies to actually making API requests. So we know we have this base URL here, right? This is something that whether we're fetching merchant reviews, like here, or if we're fetching product reviews, here, we can kind of see some similarities. So let's point those out. Here's product reviews. We don't even need this thing. Product reviews, right? And then if we go back to our docs, merchant reviews look like this. Now what's the same here? Slash reviews, but this one says all, this one says merchant, but the same is here. That's the same thing. So I'm actually going to call this our base URL. This is yet another, right, component of our strategy, our system for building integrations at Fomo. We always abstract the common denominator of API requests, and we always call it a base URL. And really this is not special, right? Anyone building an API client is going to use similar terminology, and they're going to say, well, what's the same all the time? But at Fomo, this is specific to how we build our integrations, where, you know, if, let's say api.reviews.co needed to change to api.reviews.com, well, now I only need to change one line of code, and the integration keeps working. I don't have to search through our code base for all these .co.uk examples. And now what that means is that if I want merchant reviews, let's kind of disguise these endpoints in something that's more human readable. I want merchant reviews and I want product reviews, right? Let's have our business logic run this show, not developer logic, which no one cares about. So merchant reviews are going to be that endpoint, right? This is an endpoint. The product reviews are this endpoint. So now we're good to go, and I don't even need comments anymore because I've assigned the variables to be really intuitive. Oh, I want to get merchant reviews. I want to get product reviews. So now we've got that going. Now we go back to our, we know our validator is working. Or actually, let's double check it's working. So let's kill this kind of frozen in time pry. Let's go back to Fomo. And you can see that we're now actually connected. So we've now enabled the integration. We've plugged in our values, and I have a template with the messaging we created, which of course is wrong because it needs a double curly there. So let's fix all of that. Let's go back here. And let's destroy this integration, disconnect. Now when I hit disconnect, it's going to run whatever logic I have right here, right? So I could actually say, ha ha ha, let's save that. Now let's hit disconnect, and I'm gonna Command F this for ha ha, and here it is, ha ha ha. So you can see we can run all kinds of cool little hooks, but in our case, we do not have any special logic. We don't have to, check the weather or do anything special when someone disconnects. In some of our integrations, we do. If someone disconnects an integration that's connected to an ad campaign, right, we have to do different triggers. But in this case, we don't. So I'm going to delete that code from our stub, and now we're disconnected. So now let's reconnect, but this time, instead of looking at code logic in the code, let's actually test out those validations. So let's try to type in a full URL here, right? This should not work. Continue. Must not contain HTTPS. Okay, it doesn't contain HTTPS. Now what? Must not contain HTTP. Great. Okay, so now I could do this. Continue. Now there's no errors there, but now it's giving me problems here. These can't be blank. Okay, so now I'll type in an API key. Continue. More errors. Now it says this can't be blank. Now let's type in 25, right? Continue. Must be 5 or fewer. Well, that's pretty cool. Where'd that logic come from? Well, if we go back in here, it's right there. We're just turning that value into an integer, and we're just checking. And again, this is really simplistic. There's a lot of better ways to write this, and we have a better way in stock. I'm just not going to use it on this video. It takes a couple more minutes to set up. So I'm going to now plug in another value that's in the zone. Hit continue again. Must be 5 or fewer. Oh, interesting. Undefined method dig. So this worked, but it didn't connect because I have a bug on line 79. Undefined dig for nil. Use get reviews 79. I see. Cool. So let's actually say it's not a merchant review, and it's not a product review. I want to just avoid issues. Just going to comment all this out. Okay. Hit connect again. Now it's not going to run into our coding challenges that we haven't solved yet. So now we've connected the integration, and again, I've got my values in there. I can turn it on and off. I can go back here, and I can even spin up another connection. So you see this is reviews.io 2. I can rename this to reviews.io store A, and then I can change this other one to, let's say, reviews.io store B. But in our case, neither one of these is really working. So I'm just going to close these both down, and we're going to start over. So now you can kind of see, again, all of this logic, connecting, disconnecting, error messages, handling validations, is all handled before we wrote a single line of code that actually dictates the logic, the business logic of reviews.io. So let's go back here, and now let's kind of really get into the build. So first of all, I want to fix this bug. The template message needs to have 2 closing curly braces, stars. And I also want to look at Trustpilot again, because we can do something kind of neat there. We can say, let's do something custom, right? So if I go here, add comma, sample values, view stars, I could say caption short, top-notch quality. I'll say something like really lovely company. And now this is a custom sample notification for reviews.io that you will not see when you're trying to connect Trustpilot, and vice versa. If I go over here, allowed variables, we do not get location yet. There's an address, but it's optional. This is not about recipient names because this isn't someone buying something for someone else. I'm going to wipe those. We get first name, title. We don't know if we get a URL yet, right? So when we look at these samples, I'm not seeing a URL. I'm seeing an image URL. That's cool. But I'm not seeing a page URL. This is a merchant review invitation. So that's pointing a person to that page. So I'm just going to leave out URL for now, which means I can't do title with link. Amount is irrelevant, right? Because we're not getting how much the person spent. Initials we could do, I think, because if we look at that sample data we got, there was a last name, that last name initial there. So we can try to make initials work. URL again we can't do. Variant title not relevant. So it's really a simple one, right? We can do caption long, caption short. This is what the person said. The title of the review, the first name, initials. Again, nothing crazy. Let's move initials over here. And that's kind of it. And then, of course, time ago, right? So 5 minutes ago, something like that. That's already going to be worked in. So we've got that set up. Let's kill some of these spaces. We know we want to validate. Our validations are working. Our hooks are working. We tried the before disconnect hook. We saw that work. We know that after connect properly fetches reviews. But right now, that's what's missing. It's not actually fetching reviews. So to do that, we're going to use an HTTP library. There's a lot of these. I'm not going to try to say this is the best. We use a Ruby one called HTTP Party. There are ones built into Ruby and Rails that aren't dependencies. I don't care. We like this one. And all we're going to have to pass into this are arguments, right? So our first argument is going to be the URL we want to fetch from, and then any headers, body, etc. Now for us, we've already observed in the example documentation, as well as informing our own API request in the browser, we don't need any special headers or whatever. We just need a URL, and then we have to pass in, like it says here, a store parameter. So I'm going to grab that, open a new tab, and that's all we're really trying to do. And then it's going to give us errors, right, if something happened. So let's, by the way, put this as a comment in here. Latest. We can try to use that as a way to check if they're real. So URL, what is this URL going to be? Well, this URL is just going to be our base URL plus some review endpoint. So let's start with product reviews. Let's actually just build this with product reviews for now. Because maybe a lot of users don't use merchant reviews. They might have special requests. Let's just scope this to building product reviews. And then, of course, we also need to add our authentication. So for us, that's just going to be this, right? We're going to say access token equals access token. Now, how am I able to do this? Where is this happening? This is, again, defined in a base class. We have a base class that says, go into this place and you'll find the access token, and it'll be where you want it. So it's kind of some magic happening here. And what this means is that if I'm in this method, running it in the context of a new connection, or every hour we're fetching new reviews, it's going to concatenate all these values, which is going to look just like this. It's going to be base URL plus product reviews plus these auth headers, right? Game over. Now this is identical to what we were doing in our browser, and then we're just going to parse the data. So we're just inching closer and closer, and I'm trying to work out loud how this is kind of going down. So again, if you're a developer, okay, roll your eyes, and if you're a marketer, hopefully you go, man, these developers are not that smart. Okay, so access token, auth headers. Access token is actually not right, because if we go to the documentation, the parameter we have to pass in is called API key. API key equals, right? So let's go to that API key. And now we're kind of good. So let's try this out. I'm going to connect again. It's going to freeze us in time in this method. We're going to invoke this HTTP request, which again is sort of like us going to this URL in our browser, except it's going to put it in a collection that we can parse through. And then we're going to loop through all of that data, right? Let's do that. Let's clean it up, and then we'll try to get stuff going on. So let's actually not even bother with these merchant review, product review things. We're just going to set it all up to be a product review, right? So I'm going to ignore all of this. I'm just going to map over these values because we're not going to care about merchant reviews. We're going to completely ignore merchant reviews for now. And then we're going to still do this part. So let's get it going. What I predict is we are going to connect and disconnect with our customers' real API keys a few times. And let's say by time 3 or 4 or 5, we will be done building this integration. So again, I've thought out loud throughout this process. I don't know how long this video has been so far. I thought out loud. If I wasn't making this video, I probably would have gotten to this step, let's say 20 minutes ago, right? But this is really where the real business logic comes in. I've put a couple pries into our code that's going to pause us in time. I'm going to construct the API requests and parse that data. I'm going to then map over the values we want, first name, caption, etc., from that data in this webhook parser. Then it's going to be working. Then I'm going to remove all of my pries. I'm going to connect, disconnect, disconnect, make sure that that data is turned into Fomo notifications. Then I'm going to write a couple tests. This keeps our code base higher quality. It might even expose a couple bugs or edge cases in this code. And then I'm going to write a really brief knowledge base article and ship it. So I'm going to deploy it, the test will pass, merge it into production, and within an hour or so of finishing this video, or 30 minutes of this video recording stopping, reviews.io will be live on FOMO.com. It will be documented, tested, and I will reach out to this customer whose keys we're using and say, hey, it's good to go. Thanks again for that request. Now, my next step after all of that will be to reach out to reviews.io and say, hey, we built this integration. Here's a demo. Maybe we can do some co-marketing and potentially form a bit of a relationship and do some business development. But really, our first focus is just making our customers happy, serving them and giving them the things they want when they're reasonable and in our wheelhouse. And building an integration with a product review app definitely fits that mold. So let's go through the process. I'm going to connect and disconnect with our customers' API keys, hopefully no more than 3 to 5 times. And in doing so, we will finish building the entire integration. So we need to add the API key. I want to also improve this, looking for parameters like order. Let's see, we're getting product reviews. Get all product reviews per page. Sometimes I can say, give me the most recent, right? I don't see that now. I don't care about reviews with photos. Okay, so for now, this is all we're going to worry about. Let's go into Fomo. Let's make sure it's always validating. We'll fix that later. Auth validated is true. We'll fix that later. Stellar. Let's connect. Grab our customer's API keys. Store ID, API key, minimum rating of 3. Connect. Land in my pry in just a second. Bit of, again, slow server today. Okay, get reviews. Now, let's start testing this out. Let me just copy paste this string to see if this is a legit. Now it is, but guess what? I didn't do it correctly. If I paste this in our browser, auth failed, required store. So I've already missed something in my auth headers. I need to say store equals settings, store ID, and API key. So let's try that. Okay, that's a little bit better. Now let's try this parameter added to this URL instead. Because I'd like to not have to reconnect just to fix this. So let's actually call this headers equals this. Let's dupe this, let's change this, do this. Okay, let's try this new URL. Tons of data, okay. Kill that, kill that. Okay, so let's make this request. And let's learn how to parse through this. So here's my response. You can see cool, lots of data. Now what do we do with that? Well, this is an object or a hash. So it's got all these things I don't care about. Status, that's kind of cool. It's successful, but okay, there's 193 reviews. That's kind of cool. All right, 10 per page, current page, total pages. For now, I just care about the actual reviews, right? And again, I can do what we did before. I can do resp.dig reviews. I can also do some cool helpers like resp.success. Did this API request even work? This is part of the HTTP library itself. It's not related to reviews.io. What I'll do is I'll set up a ternary operator, and I'll say if it was successful, I want the data to equal, if it was successful, resp.body .dig reviews, right? Something like that. I don't even need to parse it, actually. resp.body.dig reviews. Huh. Fantastic. So I'll say data is that. Here we go. Data equals resp data.dig reviews. Now we've got our collection of reviews. And if it wasn't successful for whatever reason, let's just return an empty array. This is going to be a collection. We'll loop through nothing. Again, we'll see how that works in a little bit. So now we actually have our entire API request to get product reviews. So it's pretty sweet. So now I know when I get to that next section. So I'm going to say reviews is all of that, right? Reviews.class, it's an array. Reviews.count, I've got 10 or so, 10 per page. Now I'm going to control D. This is going to now skip me down here to import to this binding pry. So I already have my reviews, except my first request failed. So I'm going to refetch those. Of course, I've changed auth headers, right? Our auth headers changed to that other term headers. I have to redo that. Headers equals that stuff. Data. Good catch, fix another issue. Now we've got our reviews. Got 10 or so. Cool. So now we are getting down here. So now I know I can now iterate, grab the reviews and loop through them. Now I want to really basically just connect or disconnect and connect one more time so that I get in this context and I'm getting the right thing. Because if I put a binding pry here now, nothing will happen. So Control D, it's going to finish the connection. Back in my interface, this is going to wrap it up. And let's disconnect, go through that process again. Plug in the same keys. Three rating. All right, now I've got hopefully some reviews. Here's a review. How cool is that? Now it's so easy. This is just really where it's kind of a joke. Let's get our external ID. Got an external ID. Return if it exists. It's false. It doesn't exist, of course. Get our template. That's got our messaging and the variables plugged in and all of that. Return unless it's active. Of course, it's going to be active. We just made it. User hasn't been able to deactivate it. Now I've stubbed out all these variables I want to grab that I've whitelisted up here. First name and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables. Down here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because image is not something they can interpolate. It's something we just save. Now we did also say we could get initials. So we already know initials is going to be first name dot and then last initial. So let's now add another last initial. And let's just parse. So here's our review. How do we grab all the stuff we want? Right? How do we grab the stuff we want? Well, reviewer didn't write their name correctly, but that's okay. Reviewer. And then we're going to dig deeper to first name. Okay, I don't know. Maybe this means they basically plugged in nothing. So we could write some more logic for that. Last name, it's the same concept, except it's last name. Let's actually call it, last initial, so that a developer now looking at this code later doesn't have to look at the API itself, the documentation, to go, oh, okay, this isn't actually a full last name, it's just an initial. If I named this last name, but then made initials be first name dot last name, someone on my team might have a heart attack because they would think that maybe I am exposing someone's identity. So now if I've got those two saved, first name, last initial, okay, I can see that my initials work, and ampersand dot. Obviously, again, this review is a little bit of a unique circumstance. Now let's see where I can grab that caption. I'm going to grab this review. It's really just review. Comments seems to be something they use in their merchant review paradigm, so that's fine. So params.dig review. I don't really like this architecture. I think the whole object is a review. I think that was a shortcoming on their naming, but naming is hard. I get it. Title. I don't really see something that looks like the title of their review. So I'm going to actually skip title. Yeah, I'm actually going to nuke title from the realm of possibility here. So let's delete that. Going back to where we're at, caption, review stars, that's cool. So here we go, params.dig rating 5. And I'm just going to convert this to an integer, because if the user wants to use some cool other Fomo features that do things like counting up numbers or add comma delimiters if the number was somehow 2000, I'm just going to get it in the right form. So I'm going to make that an integer. Image URL, I'm not getting an image URL of the product, so I get a product string, which is not really that useful. That's what we could use. We could say the product is title. So in this case, it looks like their product is a SKU, the product that's coming through, but different people set up different tools differently, right? So someone else, the product key value might be red shoes. So we can go back to including title, and for customers like them, it just simply won't necessarily be that useful. There's no images, so I'm not going to add an image URL yet. I'm going to leave this blank. I'm going to say find inside params.dig images. But again, in this case, it's blank, so we'll have to look at another review to handle that. Gravatar, that's kind of cool. So I can get the customer's avatar. Gravatar URL. Let's look at an example. We can learn how to quickly concatenate this so that we actually have something to use. So here we go. Supposedly, this is how this works. Let's look at this customer's gravatar. Hopefully we're exposing this because it's a public gravatar, and that's not that cool, but we'll use it anyway. So for now, we'll say image URL equals gravatarify, right? Let's pass in the params, and let's shove that logic somewhere else. And if we were to do this on multiple integrations, then we could, of course, clean this up further and maybe put this in another library in our app. Params.dig. Where is that gravatar value? Params.dig, it's inside of reviewer. Inside of reviewer, comma, gravatar. Cool. So now we're just basic concatenation. I can now paste this in memory, image URL. Now that's our image URL, okay? So we'll later figure out product, or maybe never, right? Now our last variable we need to get is created at, so let's again investigate our params. Is there a timestamp in here? Well, time ago is kind of cool, but that's not very precise. And we already do that at Fomo. So if I do params.dig created at, date created, I can actually now do a cool Rails method called toDateTime, and we're good to go. So this now maintains the integrity of when the review happens. So if someone connects to Fomo Tuesday at noon, and they have a review from the previous day, we don't want to save the review and say it just happened now at noon. We want to honor the original timestamp. So we always coerce timestamps like this. I'm going to delete all this junk we're no longer using. It's for demo purposes. Uncomment this. And let's kind of just copy paste all these into memory. Here we go. No errors yet. That. Now let's copy all these. We've got our first name, title, image URL. I think we're good. Let's try to map those over. Okay. We've got an event with a bunch of attributes. It's still not saved in our database yet. Now we have all these things. So these are special. We spin up custom attributes. Custom attributes, kind of a long story, but it's a feature at Fomo that allows us to, allows customers to plug any combination of things they want. And what we do is we take this caption and we now actually say, let's make a short version of it and a long version of it. So, you know, if someone leaves a 5-paragraph review, we're going to give you 2 variables for a long and short version of that. So we've now done all of that. Now we're going to append those custom attributes to this event. So now if I look at my event object again, I can have unlimited key value pairs in here for ratings, reviews, whatever. And then, of course, the beloved event.save. Now, why did it not save? Because stars is missing a key. Aha. Yes, review stars. Stars. Seems like a weird in-memory error to me. Now it's looping through those other 10. And let's move our binding pry down to the bottom now so that we don't actually have to manually map over variables one at a time anymore. Let's go back to our integration itself. It says we're connected. Did anything save down? Probably not. Right. Because we made all of our changes in line. Let's go back and connect again. So I'm going to go to reviews.io, disconnect this guy, connect from scratch. So we've now connected once, right? I said I'd try to do this 3 to 5 times. We've connected once with real keys. This is our second time connecting. Now let's hit our pry again. Event.save. Same issue. Stars. Aha, I know why. It's expecting we have a value that matches this. And somewhere up here, we called stars. Should be review stars, right? Review stars. That's annoying. Now I've wasted a whole connection with you guys here. So let's loop through all 10, 9, 10. Okay, it's going to finish the connection here. Let's disconnect and connect again and see if we nailed it. Okay, reviews. Highly recommend the prison latte, guys. Okay, disconnect. I'm going to have a fun time blurring out these keys, but when a company wants you to call them to get started, it doesn't really work for me. Only get 3 stars. Ooh, we actually haven't built that logic yet. Good call. We haven't built the logic that says ignore it unless it's got at least 3 stars. That's the whole point of that, right? So we've connected, don't see any errors, and look at that. Look at that. Sort by reviews. Chivas just gave us a 5-star review. Now all these gravatars are weak, right? I want to make sure that we're even doing this correctly. It's giving us a hash, but yeah, none of those gravatars are any good. So we'll clean that up. We'll have fallbacks. I'm very familiar actually with how gravatar works, but yeah, these gravatars are not any good. But I can go open this. It says Janice just gave us a 5-star rating. It helps my pain and tingling. So now that customer can go in here and on the fly make changes. They can crack open this template. First name gave us a 5-star. Let's make this more interesting. Let's make it bold. So now we can see, gave us a 5-star rating. And said, caption short, italic. It said, really lovely company. So what that's doing is it's grabbing from a library of sample values we've created. Okay, that's kind of cool, italicized. Let's now maybe wrap it in quotes. There we go. And I'm using the short version of the caption, which means it will never be too long. Now I save that, go back to my notifications, and sort by reviews. And this is kind of neat. Chivas gave us 5-star rating and said, cream is my favorite product. Great. Let's go a little further. I don't like how these names are sometimes missing. They're sometimes blank. This says anonymous. This has just an initial. This is Chivas with lowercase. Let's try to clean all of that up. I know this isn't really supposed to be a Fomo demo, but it's important. Proper case, that will kill anonymous. Lowercase stuff, I'm also going to do replace anonymous with someone. And I'm going to go in here, and then I'm going to go in rules and say if the variable first name equals, I don't know, an empty string, then change to someone, something like that. See if we cleaned any of that up. Chivas, proper casing, April, someone, this used to say anonymous if you recall. This is that quotation person. I'll probably just have those get deleted if I were this customer. Janice, April, fantastic. So we're really good to go now. It's mapping over the variables we want. We don't have tests though. We haven't really even tested it even as a click test. We haven't added an ability to authorize. So let's do that now. Let's basically make it so that if the store doesn't exist, it's not going to let them connect. So htparty.get, and I kind of put this as a hint. It looks like we can just try to fetch data about their company. So this looks like /merchant/latest. That's different than /merchant/reviews. So I'll call this auth URL. right? /merchant/latest. And let's get the auth URL, concatenate base URL plus auth URL plus store equals this store ID that they're going to be passing in, right? And then let's just return whether the response was successful. So now I might need to do 1 to 2 more connections and disconnections to get this going. So this is invoked here. Unless it's validated, basically say, couldn't find a store that matches this domain. That's fine. So let's try that again. Let's now go here. Let's connect a new instance. Let's try to make it fail first. Let's go like kind of the unhappy path. It should not work here. Store ID, blah, 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 doesn't work. API key, minimum rating. Continue. It's now going to hit our method. We're in pry, resp.success. Good. The response was not successful. Continue, and boom, couldn't find a store. That's pretty sweet. Try again. Hits this, can't find it. Now let's try with our actual API keys. Our store ID, our API key, and it should work this time. Continue, look here, let it go forward. And it's now saving. I need to remove that pry. And boom. So now we've ensured all of our validations work, made sure the values aren't blank, make sure they're not malformed, right, with HTTPS or HTTP. We made sure that there's a number versus a string. We made sure that number is between 1 to 5. Everything possible from the validation standpoint is ready to rock now. Now let's get rid of those pries. The last thing we need to do is just ignore stuff unless it has the amount of stars we want. If we go back to our API docs, min rating, this was pretty sweet, but this seems to only apply to merchant reviews, not product reviews. We already kind of tried to do a couple of these parameters on product reviews and it just didn't work. So instead of being able to fetch specifically reviews with at least 4 stars or 5 stars using these parameters, we're simply going to ignore something unless the amount is what the customer wants it to be. So if I go down here where we grab the review stars, right? We know that this is either going to be like 5 or 4 or whatever. And we know the customer has given us their minimum star count, right? And that attribute is called minimum stars. We know that's now saved in our settings, which don't need to get into where this is in our code, but we can now simply say return unless review stars is greater than or equal to the minimum stars that they assigned, right? So here, now we've taken care of that logic. So that form field, the user has said, I only want to show reviews with at least 4 stars. These 2 lines say, okay, you got it, right? And it returns early. Now, with that said, because these are doing little bits of operations, we could say, let's move this up here. Let's kind of make our app a little bit leaner and say, let's return even earlier in the flow, because if it's not enough stars, if it's a 1-star review, why even spend the micro milliseconds on this? Now, in this case, it's not a big deal. We're just grabbing values from a payload. But sometimes, let's say, to get the first name, we might need to do a separate API request to get an extended version of the review object. And in those cases, it's a total waste of bandwidth and computation power, right, to review, check these things later. We might as well check them as early as possible. So for that reason, I'll check them now, even though we're not doing anything special and it's not really computationally expensive to do it all and revert early later. So that's that. All of these things are being used, and we've got around 10 methods or so. They're invoking a couple methods that you don't see here, like access token. This method is defined in the parent base class, which this inherits from. This is a pretty cool method inheriting, delegating to the base class. This is pretty readable, after connect, before connect. This delay just says import. It's the same thing as this. But by prepending it with delay dot, we have another dependency that will actually throw that entire job in the background. And so when the user connects, they won't have to wait 10 seconds for us to parse all of those reviews we got. They will just see, great, successful. It passed the validations, and within a few seconds, those reviews will be parsed. So really, we're good to go. The next thing we can do is write tests. We could check maybe one more time it's all working okay. So let's disconnect all of these. We'll connect one more time without any of those pries that kind of slow down the experience. Okay, here we go. Four-star only. Connect. You can see. Did all of that good stuff. Now if I sort by reviews, of course my rules were killed, the ones that make sure, let's check what it is it quotes or whatever. Here we go. I can now better map that. Chevas is back to lowercase. So I can recreate those template rules, recreate adding in the comment. I can go back over here and say if the variable first name contains this, then change to someone. So again, this is on a customer basis, on a per integration basis, we find these sort of interesting things. And now you can see that quote weird syntax is gone, and that notification says, instead it says someone. Someone could also then say, if the title is FCL, change it to red shoes, right? So we're all good, integration's working. Now I need to write some tests. So I'm gonna shut down my server, and I'm gonna do the really dumb, simple thing. Spec services integrations, reviews, IO integration spec. This is not going to work, right? Because it doesn't have any clue about what reviews.io is. We haven't even written a single test ourselves, but it tries to do a couple basic things. It tries to just connect an integration and see if the notifications, if the events in our database change by 1. So it's really simple. So let's go to that file. And what I like to do is just run the tests, let them fail, and then step line by line to make them work. So these connect settings are going to be those form fields. Reviews.io, store ID, access token, minimum stars. Store ID, access token, minimum stars. I'm going to say minimum stars 3, access token, whatever. Store ID, awesomestore-com. Import data, let's throw some data. So these are fixtures. We just use a library called rspec to do tests. There's a lot of libraries. I don't really want to argue about which are better. Don't really care. And this, again, this was all done by our generator. And isn't this pretty neat because it's kind of close actually to what the actual response looks like. Now here's where we might want to say, let's grab some data using the person that just connected. So I'm going to go in our console. I don't want to run the browser anymore. I want to just do this. Let's grab our last application integration. Let's instantiate it, and now I'll have access to all those methods. So get reviews, reviews equals that, reviews.count. Let's say reviews equals reviews. Grab our first review. You'll see what's going on here. PP, pretty print that, and boom. Now we have a very accurate payload I can throw right here. Now this looks horrible. What's going on? No problem. This needs to be formatted differently. Okay, now all of these hash rockets need to be replaced. That, and all of these nils need to be replaced with null. So I'm changing data structure here. So now I've got good-looking data that myself, or more importantly, another Fomo developer can kind of look at later. Let's say we think there's a bug. Someone else can look at these stubs and say, oh, okay, that's kind of how the integration works. That's the payload structure, right? They can see that last initial, right? So I'm going to make this say Janice. I'm going to make this say Q. I'm going to change this gravatar to just something different, right? So keeping all the data sort of plain. Great. That's all good to go. Let import data be that. Time. Nobody cares. Connect settings, describe. Now we should be able to connect. Let's try to run our tests again. It's going to complain. It's not going to work. We're just inching through it. Okay. Expect to change by 1, but it changed by none. Creates a webhook. Webhook. Receive imports. We're not doing any webhooks. We're just importing data. So that's out. Let's run it again. Trying to hone in on the quote-unquote errors. Here we go. This is the good stuff. So now it says, hey, you're trying to make an API request, but you can't make API requests. That's because we don't like making API requests in our test suite. That would take a long time. Things would break all the time. There's a lot of reasons why it's a bad idea. People will argue, don't care. They don't make live stream videos of how they build integrations. So we're going to stub a request, and I want that request to be this stuff, so it's realistic, right? Now, let's turn this to, let's just see if it works. I've now stubbed out, I've kind of spoofed my code, right, into thinking that it's made an API request. Product reviews. Aha. 2 stubs. This first stub that we just did, which I mistakenly added data to, this is our auth validated. So if we go back to our reviews.io integration, remember where all we do is kind of just quickly check, does that store exist? And we ask if it's successful, right? So all this cares about is that it's a successful response. This second request, we don't care about the headers, the second request is going to expect to have data it can loop through. We're going to feed it this import data. Try to run our test again. Undefined method dig for the response. No problem. Let's not call it to JSON. This seems like we're just handling some syntax issues. Valid encoding for array. Okay. Let's try connect settings. Let's go to our reviews.io integration and let's pry inside of where it's grabbing reviews because something's going on here. Something's going on here. Aha, that's why. That's why. That's why, because I need to make this more accurate. So these are the reviews, that's great. But if you remember, they were surrounded by other stuff. They were surrounded by like status, review counts, all these other values we don't really care about. But to make my tests valuable, right, I have to kind of spoof all of that. So that's the data, data.keys. Here we go. Data, let's see, keys equals that stuff, keys minus reviews, keys.delete reviews, keys, data, bear with me, grab the key. Basically I want to say, let's just do this, data.reviews equals nothing. We've already got that established. Now I want to grab this data. There we go. Now we're going to put this into our import response. Hope this kind of makes sense. I wasn't accurately reflecting what the API response actually looks like. I was ignoring some of these other values, which all need to be there. It makes it more realistic to test. It's really the only way to know when I'm refactoring code later if everything is kind of kosher. So we've got that in there. Let's do another one of these things where we find and replace hash rockets with that. Any more nulls? No. Groovy. Okay. Now we're in better shape. Let's try this process again. Okay. Let's binding pry. Now I don't know what's happening. It's going to lock us in right here. We're going to see what's kind of neat is it looks like we're making an API request, but we're not, right? Aha, so it's JSONified. We don't want that. So I'm going to remove this to JSON because that's not accurately representative of the API request. So what's cool here again is we're now sort of interacting with an API, but we're not because this is all spoofed data. Try again. Let's actually try. Let's try to do this a little bit differently. Sometimes you'll spend more time writing tests than building something. At least that's how it goes for me. Yeah, it's actually something like that. Simplify it, refactor later. Try again. Dig for string. Kind of getting annoyed, but it happens. JSON fixture. Just check this out. What does this look like? What does our import stub look like? Reviews.io. Import. Cool. It's looking good to me. Integration spec. Just let me play with the data. Yeah, so it's not liking something even further up there. Food chain. This might be why I said I'm not a real developer. I take the guess and check. Reviews.io. So here's an option we could have pursued earlier. Simply pry inside of our tests themselves, just like we were prying. Okay, so that's looking really good. Okay, now if I were to say subject, is this going to freak out? Undefined method dig for string. Okay. Undefined method dig. Parsed response. Still request. Subject. Try again. Should be 0 events. Subject. 0 events. Well, this is annoying. Let's get started on the documentation. Go over to intercom. You can kind of see, we've already looked before at our help desk. We kind of follow the same rules. So we have this integrations guide setup. Inside of the integrations guide, we have a subheader for each integration, and then we have a how to connect blank. And that's what enables us in this file to keep a perfect system where I already know what the integration help guide article is going to be. So if I go in here and go to our help guide, integration guides, make a new section. Now, of course, that section wants it to be reviews space IO. So what I'm going to do, I don't know if this is an intercom hack or what you'd call it, but I'm actually going to literally name this section reviews IO, because that's going to now generate a URL, reviews -IO. I can change it later and that URL will still work. I'm going to alphabetize this, all part of the system. S's, REC, REV, REF, Fro Candy, hello, reviews.io. So I've got my section stubbed out. Now let's get our article. Again, if we go to, say, Trustpilot, you can see we kind of introduced the integration. And of course, it's always named the same. How to connect Fomo with, and because again, it needs to be reviews.io, I'm going to say reviews.io, right? Product reviews. And I'll add some more SEO here from reviews.co.uk, right? So someone could search our knowledge base for that, and they wouldn't necessarily search for IO. Reviews.io is a product, merchant, and local review solution. We don't use too much, sort of puffery, nice language. We're pretty agnostic, right? We don't really recommend anybody over anybody else. If you use reviews, you can now showcase them on your website. But it's not in real time because we don't have webhooks support. You can see step 1, enable reviews.io. Insert. Step 2, you're done. That's going to be it. Now, not every integration is this simple, but in our case, it is. So we use the same kind of language, sometimes similar screenshots. Reviews.io. Click connect with reviews.io. On the next page, I'd like to say, copy your store ID, API key, and an API key. Those are required. We don't actually care if they fill out their minimum star count, but API key. You also specify a minimum rating score for Fomo to ignore lower quality reviews. You're done. And again, I could kind of make a new sample notification, right? Which we can do. Obviously, I don't want it to say Trustpilot. And I need to make a sample there. So if I were to go back here, my server's not running because we're struggling with our tests. Let's see what's going on. Load fixture, JSON fixture. JSON fixture. Let's just put that up here. Not calling JSON on it. Let's get in here, fix this once and for all. So now we're really ready to go. I mean, We've got our support article. I need to make an example notification, and then I just need to deploy it. The test will take around 30 minutes to pass, and then it will be live. Good times. Okay. Give it that. Okay, subject. Okay. Stellar. We got the fix. Okay, let's try that. Should have done this the first time, Ryan. Okay, so now I think we're going to be good to go. Let's rerun our tests. Take another look at this as I go. We're spoofing our API response in the right format as the actual API, and then parsing it the same way. Groovy. All right. So now we're good. So now what's happened is we've stubbed out API requests. So when it tries to run the validations, when it tries to fetch reviews, we're feeding it back a sample review, which is contained in here, in the same syntax or same format, so that when it then loops through and runs through our webhook parser, through our integration service, we know it's going to actually bump up our events. And so there's a lot of talk in testing, and it's kind of an art and a science, right? I'm not necessarily saying I'm any good at it. There's a lot of talk about how do you get full coverage, right? And how do you make sure that every line of code in your app has a test that invokes that code? Well, what's cool here is even though we have, let's say, I don't know, def. We have 9 methods, 10 if you count this, and we have a few constants defined if you count these. So we have 15, 16 things declared. We have 20 different variables, 15 variables maybe coming through. How do we know our code's tested? Well, some people take the path of sort of writing down a test, call import and this happens, invoke gravatarify and this should happen. But we simply say, hey, if we pass it this data into the service, into the black box, at the end of it, it should create an event. And if it does, we know that it's hit all of these parameters. Now, I could also even say something like, if I pass in a review that has 4-star count, then I want to make sure that the events don't change at all, right? So I could even try to briefly make one more valid connect settings. I don't know. I could say valid connect settings with low quality review. So I'm going to use those connect settings. So minimum stars, let's say 4. Reviews IO. Let's make sure that rating is, okay, it's 5. Let's now call this stars. Now I can actually, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to deal with that right now. But you get the idea, I could write another test that says, if I pass in a review collection where the star count is lower, I want to make sure that you don't save anything, right? I could also do something simple here. I could say it should create a gravatar image for each reviewer, right? So something like that. And now let's build that test. So what we want is we want that event created dot image URL to sort of have this schema going on, right? Okay, event.last. Oh, we've now said minimum stars 4. We've given this. It killed that. Expect event.last.image URL to include, and then we can make sure that it includes this somewhere in there. So now, again, another developer at Fomo can kind of change around, refactor the code, and these tests will make sure that they don't break something. Looking good. But now with just one, technically with just one test, a test is this thing right here, this it block, it do, that's a test, an example. With just one test, one example, we've actually invoked within that test every line of code in this file, which gives us 100% test coverage. I added this second one sort of as a stylistic thing. I'm sort of saying, hey, I'm not happy with how image URLs are created right now. Maybe later it won't be called gravatarify. It will be something special that sort of says, you know, if there's a product image, save that. Otherwise, fall back to gravatar. I could do something like that in a future iteration of this integration. And that's why some of those kinds of tests can be good almost to enforce business logic more so than enforcing code or syntax. So integration's ready to go. Last thing we need is a sample notification here. I'm going to save this before I screw it up. And we also need the reviews co-UK avatar in SVG. So we keep SVGs to kind of keep generally to keep the kilobyte file size down. I don't know if they have SVG. If they don't, I will make one. Yeah, it looks like an AI. That should be fine. Let's open up Illustrator. You can also use different online tools. Ooh, do I not have it installed anymore? I can use online tools to convert to SVG, but just another business logic thing. SVG, review box, review white. Which one do we like? We definitely want something that's kind of square. So it's going to be this. I think we'll go with this. No, we won't. We'll go with the box. They will get some cool extra branding. Okay, so now I'm going to just crack open this file in here. And I'm going to go to the two places in our code where we set up those icons with placeholders. Fomo icons. If you remember, our generator built these for us. So I'm going to swap that out. Okay, Fomo, and I could actually do it this way too. Okay, now I've swapped them both out. Now let's actually try to run our server for a couple reasons. We want to maybe make our sample integration image. We also want to make sure that the icon looks okay on our website. So let's go back to localhost integrations. Let's look at the logged out page. And let's see if reviews.io avatar is now appearing and not the fallback, which was our Fomo F icon. And there we go. So that's loading in there. Looks a little weird in my opinion. I don't like to say the word. Maybe I'll ask them for just a star. I don't feel like hacking their icon to achieve that though. People have brand guidelines, try to stick to them. But if I go now to our logged in page, which reads from that other directory, here we go. So we can see reviews.io is in there. And I can see all the data. It's working out. So now if I were to, let's say, go here, maybe crack open one of these Janus. I like Janus. We can go to Unsplash maybe and find a free legal stock photo. It's time to trigger people. Let's look for a pretty girl. I want a grown woman. Sure. She looks kind of Russian to me. That's kind of cool. Okay, I don't like how it's stretched. Just making a sample here, and I want it to be realistic, and I want it to be legal. The face could be a little fatter. That's cool to me. Janice just gave us a, let's modify this in line. Three months ago, not very interesting. Okay, now let's kill this junk. Let's make this background white. Kill this live preview. Zoom in so it's a little bit higher resolution. There's my screenshot. We're kind of, I don't know, geeks about SEO in just the small technical ways. So when you upload files to different products, a lot of times it bastardizes your images, right? But Fomo reviews, IO, sample, Fomo notification. But just in case a server or a tool, let's say Intercom or your changelog or your WordPress or wherever, if it kind of keeps your file metadata as is, the titles, any other aspects, it's worth, in my opinion, spending an extra moment to sort of rename it and give it SEO-friendly values, because now potentially someone could search reviews.io integration or reviews.io social proof integration, and our image would actually be part of that ranking, would be worked into that Google result. Now I finally go back to our help center. I go to our integration guides, and I have to move that file to my reviews.io block. Scroll down to ours. I don't know why. Oh, I know why referral hero got moved, because they used to be called Mater in. Let's move them down. Good times. I don't remember how this works. Space over H. Okay, cool. Now let's see if our URL, our sort of default URL, reviews.io, is sort of being honored, right? How to connect reviews.io. Let's go to that URL. Did I do it all correctly? I did not. Actual URL, integration guide, reviews.io, how to connect Fomo with reviews.io. How to connect reviews.io. Aha. Let's go back in here. That's no problem, because now that URL should be honored. So it's going to create a new URL, and it redirects the old URL, so no big deal. How to connect reviews.io. Now I want to do one more cool thing. I want to clean it up. So I want to do reviews.io. And now that I've already generated the URL with the space, I should be able to refresh this, and it should still work. And it does. It now changed it. It forwarded me, but it honors the old one. And one last time, let's now do that in our help center. So this is just kind of show that we created a system, but because we have dependencies on other tools, in our case, Intercom, we didn't build our own knowledge base. There are things we have to do to take special care so that our system can kind of fit into that square-shaped hole. But again, as we figured it out, now this reviews-io still works. It doesn't care. So we honored our system. We didn't have to break the chain here. Every help link has this very predictable strategy. But because I know the gaps in our connected tools like Intercom, I was able to kind of just make a couple moves that make everybody happy. So we've got a help article. We've got a sample notification. We're using a free photo. So it's legit, and it's using actual variables available to our customer. And we've added a little SEO here so they can search reviews co-UK, and that should also allow them to find it. We've got tests that have 100% coverage, and now it's time to just commit that other stuff. So we've only done one commit so far. We generated the integration, right? Now we have another commit. I'm going to ignore this. This is something my computer's been doing weird. I could look at these. I could just say, hey, git add public reviews.io icon. Sometimes I'm not this generous. I'll just do one commit. Git add app services integrations. So this file, which has all of our logic, integration service, git add config data, that has our right status, form fields, integration meta, maybe in form fields, and then our specs. These are tests, test coverage. So we're good to go. Origin, feature, reviews, IO, integration. Pushing it up, I can go to our tool of choice for continuous integration, and we can just briefly see that I have some code now running on the server that is going to run all of these tests in this spec folder, around 2,500 tests. It takes about 30 minutes. And it's going to then deploy the integration. I'll then crack open, again, my Trello integration tracker. And I'll reach out to this customer and say, thanks for the request. It's now live. So we hopefully got that done pretty quickly. Probably would have shaved 30 to 40 minutes off if I just did it without the video footage. But hopefully that thinking out loud helped you think about how to build integrations at your company, the advantages of scalable, repeatable processes, building generators, sticking to conventions, everything from how we write our help articles to the URLs of those help articles to the names of our methods to sample code in our tests that we regenerate. All of that just contributes to us being able to build integrations in 1 or 2 hours on average, make our customers happy sooner, ultimately build a library of many integrations that take not too much code to support in the long term. So thanks again for watching. If you'd like to see more of this, I actually also did a 13.5-hour live stream where I built an entire SaaS app from scratch. We deployed it, put it on a .com, all of that. And you can check that out on YouTube. I think probably search Ryan SaaS app live stream and you'll find that. So again, thanks for watching. Have a good one.